Janavajanaravanjana Nandana Vajanaravanjana Yamunatira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Ashtotara Shata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, entitled Questions via Vidura, text number 39. Yamav Utsadvi Tanayo Pitayaha Tanayo Pitayaha Pate Vito Pakshmavi Akshiniva Pakshmavi Akshiniva Remata Udaya Midesva Ritam Parat Supana Viha Vajri Vaktrat Yamav Uttasvit Tanayo Pitayaha Pitayaha Pate Vito Pakshma Vi Akshiniva Remata Udhaya Midhesva Ritam Parat supanav iva vajri vaktrat. Yamav utsatvit tanayo pitayaha. Pate vito pakshmavi akshiniva. Re mata udaya medesva riktam. Parat supanav eva vajri vaktrat. Word for word. Yamo. Twins, Nakula and Sahadev. Utsatvit. Weather. Tanayo. Sons. Pitayaha. Aprita. Patai. By the sons of Prita. Vito Ramate. Playing carelessly. Udaya. Snatching. Madai. In the fight. Svariktam. Own property. Parat. From the enemy Duradan. Sapano. Garuda. The carrier of Lord Vishnu. Eva. Like. Vajri Vaktrat. From the mouth of Indra. Translation. Are the twin brothers who are protected by their brothers doing well, just as the eye is always protected by the eyelid? They are protected by the sons of Prita, who snatched back their rightful kingdom from the hands of their enemy, Duryodhana, just as Garuda snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra, the thunderbolt carrier. Please repeat. Are the twin brothers who are protected by their brothers doing well, just as the eye is always protected by the eyelid. They are protected by the sons of Prita, who snatched back their rightful kingdom from the hands of their enemy Duryodhana. Just as Garuda snatched nectar from the mouth of Indra, the thunderbolt carrier. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Indra, the king of heaven, carries a thunderbolt in his hand and is very strong. Yet Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, was able to snatch nectar from his mouth. Similarly, Duryodhana was as strong as the king of heaven, and still the sons of Prita, the Pandavas, were able to snatch away their kingdom from Duryodhana. Both Garuda and the Partas are pet devotees of the Lord, and thus it was possible for them to face such strong enemies. Vidura's inquiry was about the youngest brothers of the Pandavas, namely Nakul and Sahadev. These twin brothers were sons of Madri, the stepmother of the other Pandavas. But although they were stepbrothers, because Kunti took charge of them after the departure of Madri with her husband Maharaj Pandu, Nakul and Sahadev were as good as the other three brothers, as the other three Pandavas, Yudhisthira, Bhima and Arjuna. The five brothers are known in the world as regular brothers. The three elder Pandavas took care of the younger brothers, just as the eyelid takes care of the eye. Vidura was anxious to know whether, after winning back their own kingdom from the hands of Duryodhana, the younger brothers were still living happily under the care of their elder brothers. Om Nagantam Nanda Shakanam Jana Shalakaya Shakshurtamena Tasma Shivaya Namaha Pancha Kalparu Pischa Kipusundube Evata Kutikna Papanabhyo Vaishnavo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Thank you for attending Srimad Bhagavatam class. I hope I can speak something of value, and it's for my own purification. So we can see in this chapter that Vidura is getting the association of Uddhava. And Uddhava is a very advanced devotee. He's a disciple of Brihaspati, who is the spiritual master of the demigods. And not only that, but he's the son of Devabhaga. So Devabhaga is the father of Krishna. So that makes Uddhava very close to Krishna. He's a cousin of Krishna. And as Nrsimha Kavacha just mentioned in a class the other day, he actually looks like Krishna. He's got lotus eyes and he's blackish. And not only that, but he's so qualified that he's a Nitya Siddha. So he's eternally perfect. He has his Krishna consciousness is fully manifested. And we're called Nitya Buddha, unfortunately. We're eternally conditioned. But we have a practice which we can follow where we become perfect in our Krishna consciousness. And this is the practice of devotional service or sadhana bhakti. And the benefit is that when Uddhava took birth, as we explained in the previous verses, that he had a natural instinct to serve Krishna because he's an eternally perfect devotee. So when he was young, he had little dolls of Krishna, and he would, with his natural instinct, just start serving them. He would start feeding them and clothing them and worshipping them, doing deity worship, a bit more informal than what we have here. But we can see the kids nowadays, what do kids get? I can remember when I was a child, I had a G.I. Joe. I don't know if you heard of G.I. Joe, but you know, he comes with a machine gun. You know, Krishna has his chakra and his club and his, a conch and a lotus flower, and with G.I. Joe you get like a machete, you know, a machine gun, a knife and a pistol. So these are different paraphernalias that G.I. Joe had. And even what the ladies get, they get Barbie dolls. And I think personally Barbie needs to wear more clothes. And, you know, they dress her up in mini skirts and other things. She look much nicer in a sari, Papa would say. But we can see, you know, the kids, they get impressed, they get impressions, or they get impressed upon very easily at an early age. So with these other things that we give them when we're young, they leave bad impressions on the mind, or not so favourable impressions. But we can see with Uddhava, he had a very favourable impression from his early age. He was totally absorbed in Krishna and serving Krishna. And Nrsimha Kavacha mentioned in a previous verse that when his mother would call Uddhava to come for breakfast or eat some food, he wasn't interested. He was just totally happy playing with his Krishna doll. So when we take up Krishna consciousness sooner, it's better. But it's better late than never. And I'm referring to that myself because I took up Krishna consciousness when I was 35. So sooner the better, but better late than never. And there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam which helps us understand that we take off where we left off in our Krishna consciousness. The pure devotees, like Uddhava, he's not taking off where he left off because he has, you know, perfect Krishna consciousness. But for us it's a bit different. So it says, Tattvatam buddhi samyogam, labate pervadehikam, yatate chatato buddho, samsidho karunandana. He says, on taking such a birth, we revive the divine consciousness of our previous life, and again we get a chance to attain complete perfection. So we practice a bit of bhakti in our previous lives, or we've got some special mercy to take it up, and then we practice bhakti, and then we have like a bank account, a bhakti bank account. So by doing service, we're depositing, you know, these credits of bhakti into our account. And unlike the material bank accounts, which at the time of death it all gets taken away, and not only that, but usually the family members are fighting over your bank account. They go to court over it and they have a family feud on who gets the money. But with our spiritual bank account, no one can take it away. So, you know, we finish off with 50%, and then in our next life we get the opportunity to take off at 51%. And Uddhava had a full account, so he was able to enter into the pastimes of Krishna or be associated with Krishna, and that's what we're looking forward to. When we get a full Krishna conscious bank account, we can enter into Krishna's pastimes and be an associate of Krishna. And not only that, but Krishna, he also has different levels of devotees. In his pastimes he has his Nitya Siddha, who are eternally perfect, and if we develop our spiritual bank account to a high degree, 100%, we can also enter into those pastimes from the eternally conditioned state to get more training. And not only that, but the bhakti, even though we may, get 100%, the bhakti, it doesn't end there. Our devotion is always maturing, always developing, always becoming deeper. And it produces more feelings and emotions. So, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it explains this journey of the bhakti creeper. It's called the bhakti lata. It's like a little creeper within the heart. And it's our devotional creeper. And it's explained when we take up devotional service, through the hearing and chanting process, we water and nurture this bhakti lata. And by following the rules and regulations, we put up like a fence around it to protect our little creeper from getting damaged. And the journey of the creeper, by hearing and chanting and practicing devotional service, it goes through the coverings of the universe, through the Viraj river, through Vaikuntha, the spiritual, or the Brahma Jyoti, through the Vaikuntha planets. And if we're qualified, we can enter into Goloka Vrindavan, which is the planet of the cows. This is where Krishna lives. And there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that this creeper, it takes shelter at Krishna's lotus feet in the spiritual world. And it doesn't end there. It says that this creeper produces fruits. So the more we hear and chant and water and nourish this creeper, it produces fruits at the feet of Krishna. And the fruits just don't stay, in one situation. No, they keep on maturing and getting sweeter and more ripe through the hearing and chanting process. So other great devotees also practice this Krishna consciousness from an early age. And it's explained that Parikshit Maharaj also played with dolls. And Srila Prabhupada even as well, he was playing with Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra from an early age as well. And there's another devotee called Prahlad Maharaj. And he also used to preach to his classmates at an early age of 5. He was more advanced than playing with dolls. He went to school, and at an early age of 5 years he would preach Krishna consciousness to his other classmates. And he would tell them, give up sports and games, we have a higher goal in life, so you should engage in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Achanam, Vansanam, Dashanam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So he was encouraging his classmates to take up devotional service. But kids need to play sports and games. I don't know if there's any mothers here. But we had Gundicha the other day, and some kids came on to, participate in the cleaning, but we found that they were mainly playing sports and games. They were doing this like slap with their hands and, playing games like this, so we thought it was taking more time to engage them in service than what it is to just let them go and play games. But as adults, if we're still playing sports and games, then that's a problem. Kids it's okay, but not adults. And my best friend, who I went to school with, we played football together. His name is Craig McRae, and he's now the coach of the Collingwood football team. A pretty amazing position. And the whole purpose of football is obviously football is the usual foot to kick the ball. And the big question that a lot of footballers ask is, did the ball go through the goals or didn't it? Did the ball go through the goals or didn't it? And they sit in pubs and they watch this and they debate, did the ball go through the goals or didn't it? And then after the football match they have like TV shows and they analyse, did the ball go through the goal or didn't it? So this is the big question. And if I were to ask maybe Nandu Prabhu, is this a big, did the ball go through the goal or not? Nandu would probably say, I just want to play Madanga and go on Harinam or something, glorify Krishna. But there's a devotee in Srila Prabhupada's time, his name was Dasa Prabhu, and he was going on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada around 6:30 in the morning, and they were walking past a golf course and they saw some men playing golf, and particularly one gentleman who was putting. And Srila Prabhupada looked and he goes to Dasa Prabhu, he says, what is this guy, what is this gentleman doing? Dasa Prabhu said, he's playing golf, Srila Prabhupada, he's practicing, he's perfecting his putting. And Srila Prabhupada says, what is he doing? He's wasting his human form of life doing this. If he were to use the same austerity that he's getting up early in the morning to putt this golf ball into a hole, he would perfect his Krishna consciousness in one life. And we can see nowadays that sports stars are actually promoted to the position of acharyas or teachers. And in general, most of the sports stars try and set a good example because they understand, they have a lot of influence. But there are exceptions, the ones that don't set good examples. And it said, Yad yad arachiti shreshas tat tat eva tarojanaha. It says that when we have position and fame, we're in the spotlight and people are looking up to us and they're seeing by example on what behaviour we should be doing as well. They get influenced very easy. And just recently there was this football star, he played in NRL, which is kind of football but throwing the ball. And he got charged with rape, unfortunately. Not for him, but for the other person, and for him as well. But he went to court. He got put through court over 2 or 3 years. They couldn't decide whether he was guilty or not. So at the end of it, they found him not guilty. And so what did he do? I mean, he didn't really adjust his behaviour so nicely because 2 weeks later, during COVID, he was caught by the police in a drunken state. Right? I think it was hiding under a bed because the police came and raided this house because they're having an illegal party, all the football people. So he was drunk and everyone else was drunk, so they escorted him off and fined him and charged him. And this is the example of some of these sports people. They don't behave so well. They don't set such a good example. And we can see that Uddhava, though, who I was referring to before, he is setting the best example on becoming Krishna conscious, being absorbed in Krishna. And the reason is that he's setting this example because the material world is a place of distractions. And the mind is called Bahu Shaka, which means that the mind can't really fix on one thing. It's looking for many different things to fix on in the material world. And not only that, but the material world is designed to divert our attention from Krishna. It's not one of the only reasons, it's one of the reasons. And there's a verse I learnt the other day, Indriyanam hi charatam yam manu anubhidhiyate tat asya harati pragnam vayo navam ivambasi. And this explains that as a strong wind blows a boat across the water, you've all seen a boat with the sails and that, and the wind blows it across. So similarly, even one of our roaming senses, which the mind focuses upon, can carry away our intelligence. And this is why Krishna recommends that we become absorbed in him, because in the material world it's very easy to become diverted. And not only that, but Krishna wants us to go back to the spiritual world more than what we want to. And just recently I was in Byron Bay and I distributed a book to a couple, a Bhagavad Gita, and the guy took it and he goes, "Oh wow, the Bhagavad Gita, I remember this book, I've had it previously, I was really inspired by it." But then he went to me, there's always a but. When people say but, you've got to be prepared for something, but he goes, "But, why is it all about Krishna? Why is it all about him, and why can't we do other things? Why is it all about him? Why can't it be about other people?" And he was with his girlfriend, and I could tell when they walked across the road they were maybe newly in love. You can see people when they're in love, they're really bouncing across, like they're floating across the road, happy and not really attentive to anything but themselves. So I said, "This is your girlfriend, yeah?" And he goes, "Yeah." "Well, if you were walking along and your girlfriend's looking at everything and everyone else and everything but you, would you feel that she loves you?" And he goes, "Probably not." And says, "Well, this is also Krishna as well. I mean, it's not unrealistic to think that Krishna, if we want to love Krishna, that he's expecting us to give, our full attention and focus to him. It's quite natural. But when we say that Krishna wants this, it's a problem. It's something happens within us. Maybe it's a bit of envy. So people say that Krishna is egocentric, but for us, we want it. When we're with someone, we expect them to give us their full attention, their full focus, their full absorption, their full love. But with Krishna, we really kind of, we have a bit of a problem with that. So with Uddhava, it wasn't possible for his attention to be diverted because he has full love for Krishna. And not only that, but as explained previously, that when Uddhava found out that Krishna was leaving the world, he was going back to the spiritual world. Uddhava playfully begged Krishna that he could go back with him. This is what it means that when someone can't have their attention diverted, that he couldn't fathom being separated from Krishna, not even for a moment. But Krishna, he had another plan for Uddhava. He revealed more confidential knowledge to Uddhava, and he told him to take sannyas, right, which is a renounced order. But not only that, but he wanted him to take sannyas, and he endowed him with so much confidential knowledge that he wanted him to go preach to other devotees. This is a real welfare work. You know, we always want to be with Krishna, but there's also something higher. We can also share it with others. And so he sent him to Badrika Ashram because there were many devotees there. When Krishna was here, he didn't visit them or see them. So he wanted Uddhava to go to Badrika Ashram and then enlighten them more in Krishna consciousness. And this is what it means to be sannyas, particularly a Vaishnava sannyas, is that we go out and preach. And I began my practice, I think, same as Yadu Prabhu in Melbourne, ISKCON Melbourne. And the temple president's wife, her name is Ajincha Rupa Mataji. I don't know if you know, but she's a very wonderful devotee. And when I first come to Krishna consciousness, she was teaching me. I mean, we all have to learn from the beginning, so I learned what a Mataji is, a lady, a mother. And then she was telling me Maharaj, because we have many swamis coming in, sannyasis, and he goes, all right, this is a Maharaj, and Prabhu. So I learned how to address the different devotees. So I was walking around going, Mataji, Mataji, and there was a sannyasi there, and I never saw this Maharaj then, and I was going, Prabhu, Hare Krishna Prabhu, just getting familiar with the etiquette. And then I went into the bathroom and I saw the sannyasi in saffron, and I just saw, oh, Hare Krishna Mataji. And he looked around and he goes, Mataji, Mataji? He thought maybe there was a woman there in the men's bathroom. And he goes, Mataji? And he looked at me and he goes, Mataji? And I go, Mataji? Oh, Maharaj, oh. I blew it. And he looked at me and he started laughing and he goes, oh my God. Probably thinking, oh, he's new bhaktas, you know. Got no idea. So he was kind and he just laughed at me. But it's the sannyas ashram, it actually, if you want to go into it a little bit deeper, it is a renounced order, so they want to detach from the material world and give Krishna to others, but it's a progressive ashram of renunciation. And I was just looking recently that the 4 stages are, and they're quite interesting. The first stage of sannyas is called kuti chaka, which means that a devotee, they accept the renounced order, but they stay outside the village and they have a little cottage. And from there, the family members in the villages, they help them, they give them their necessities, they give them their food, their clothing and whatever, just to give them a bit of renunciation. And we can see nowadays, when the people get older, sometimes the parents or the kids, they force them into a sense of renunciation. Have you ever heard of a granny flat? Yeah. So when the kids want the parents out of the house, want a bit more freedom, what do? They build a granny flat. They build a little cottage outside the village, and they bring them their food. Actually, nowadays they don't bring their food. They maybe give them takeaway numbers so they can get takeaway food. The kids want it a bit easier. But they also, nowadays, actually I'll go back to the next one. The next stage is called bahudaka, which means that after the first stage, when one lives outside the village and he gets the necessities, he advances further and he no longer accepts food and necessities and much shelter from the people from home and the villages. So he accepts madhukari. And madhukari means it's like a bumblebee, the profession of a bumblebee. So just like a bee goes around the different flowers and collects its nectar, its fruit from different flowers. So the sannyas in the bahudaka, he travels from different places and gets his food from different sources, but he just doesn't take food, he also goes and enlightens them, gives them spiritual knowledge. And when he becomes more experienced, he goes to the parivajrakachaya, which means that he gives up any connection to a place, a home, and he just travels around the world and preaches. And his only purpose is just to preach Krishna consciousness. He's not really interested in making a home or settling down. and becoming attached that way. And if he progresses further, he goes into the next stage called Paramahamsa. And this means that he finishes his preaching work, and he's preached quite extensively, and he's not stopping his preaching work because he's exhausted, not at all. It's more of an internal kind of development. So he sits in one place and just focuses on his hearing and chanting. And just like the sannyas who wants to become renounced from the material world more and more and preach Krishna consciousness, for us it's also not the goal of life to become renounced from the material world. Being renounced isn't enough. It's just like the workers, sometimes you see workers go on strike. They want to renounce the job because the conditions aren't good. But that's not enough, because eventually they'll have to go back to work. So if we try and renounce the material world, it's not enough. Eventually we're going to have to come back into the material world and do some work again. So it's just like the impersonalists actually. The impersonalists, they want to renounce the material world. They may leave it temporarily, but they'll have to come down, because that desire to be active is still there. And this is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Ye anyayra vandaksha vimukti maninas tvayasta bhavad abhishuddha buddhaya arura kutrena param padam tata patanti adho najata yusmarangraya. So it's explained that even though we want to try and renounce the material world, and we may even become liberated, but because we don't have shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, it's called anadriktaha. It's because we've neglected service to Krishna, we'll have to come down to the material world. So just renouncing isn't enough. I can remember I tried my little stint of renunciation in the material world, and I can remember I read a health book, and I was reading the health book and it said, if you have mental problems, do fasting. I thought, wow, this is really for me. I had a lot of mental problems at this point in my life before I was a devotee. I thought, oh, I'll give fasting a go. So they recommended different levels of fasting, so I thought I would try 10 days. So I got these things of distilled water, and I thought, all right, I'm going to fast and have no more mental problems. So I started fasting, and after half a day I realised I had more mental problems than before. I was like, so hungry. But I stuck it out, because I wanted to have no mental problems. So I got to the 10th day, and I looked like Gandhi. I'm really emaciated. And so that was a bit of an achievement, and it did work to a certain extent. And I can remember I was doing volunteering a bit later on, and I did some volunteering at a pioneer bush settlement in the bush, just with some other volunteers, a bit like woofing. And I was with a group of people, and because I'd achieved, this fasting initially, I announced to everyone, all right, I'm going to go fasting. And they go, fasting? What? Yeah, I'm going to go away for 10 days, just down in the river. And they were like, wow, you're like so renounced. And so I got my tent and I parked it down near the river across the road, and I got my water, and see you later, I'll see you in 10 days. Well, that night, Melbourne's very cold, and it started pouring down with rain. And I got soaked, it's near a river. And I can remember like 2 a.m, I thought, flag this, I'm cold, I'm hungry. So I snuck back into the village, and the first place I went into was the commercial kitchen. And they had big freezers, because we used to have, at the Pioneer Village, we used to have like school camps come, and we'd feed them. And so I got into the freezer, and I got the big Neapolitan ice cream, a big tub. And I remember what it was a Sara Lee, what is that, blueberry apple crumble. So I whacked that in the oven, and I didn't even let it heat up. It got to about 10 minutes. It needed 20 minutes to get hot, so I just took it out warm and slapped on the Neapolitan ice cream and started eating, it was just like nectar. And then the next morning when I had to face all the people, I announced that I was doing yogi stuff, and I said, it wasn't so auspicious, it's kind of like, it wasn't the right time. But we can see that, if we try and withdraw our senses from the material world and some gratification, they bounce back. And what do the senses say? When we try and restrict them from sense gratification, they go, all right, I did this for a little while, but you owe me. Now it's payback. And usually they come back stronger. And there's this verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, one who withdraws his senses from the sense objects but who meditates within is called a pretender. So I was a pretender. But there's also hope for us as well. There's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam which says, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayodhita Janati Ashu Vairagam Jnananan Yadhu Ahutukam. It says that just by engaging in devotional service, we don't need to try and renounce and detach from the material world. Detachment automatically comes. Why? Because we're learning about Krishna. We get jnanam, we get knowledge and attraction to Krishna. So this is one of the only ways we can detach from the material world, is to become attracted to Krishna. Krishna will help us become detached from the material world. And there's this wonderful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam which says, Nayam deho deha budran viloke kasam kaman ahati vipujame depotiva putraka savam yujed yasma brahma sokyam tu anantam. And this is Lord Rishabh telling his wonderful sons. He says that of all living entities who accept the material bodies in the world, one who has been awarded the human form of life should not work day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available to the dogs and hogs who eat straw. Rather, one should begin divine austerities, to help us achieve supreme happiness. So this verse explains that we need sense gratification, but Lord Rishabh says that actually the animals are getting it. So what's the real bonus of having sense gratification if the animals are getting it as well? Why is it so important for humans? So he says, Tapodivya putraka yena savam. He says that actually our human form of life is meant to perform austerities, to engage in service. And how hard are our austerities? This is considered an austerity. Maybe it is to listen to me, but for sitting down and giving time to listen to Bhagavatam, getting up in the morning and chanting and taking prasadam, these are considered austerities, because usually, I don't know what people are doing nowadays, they're sleeping or they're eating other stuff which isn't Krishna prasadam, but this is our austerity, and chanting 16 rounds or chanting Hare Krishna. So I'll just get back to the purport here in the translation, and it says here that Indra, the king of heaven, carries a thunderbolt in his hand and is very strong. Yet Garuda, the carried Lord Vishnu, was able to snatch nectar from his mouth. So there's a pastime in which Indra had a pot of nectar. And one day Garuda, I only just looked at this pastime recently, so I'll paraphrase it. Garuda's mum, Virata, Vinasa, she had a dispute with Kadru, who was a wife of Kashyapa Muni. They were both wives of Kashyapa Muni. And they had a bit of a lady thing. They had a dispute. Does happen, men do it as well. And so Kadru arrested Garuda's mum, and she kidnapped her, and Kadru's mother of the serpents. So Garuda found out that actually his mother had been kidnapped. So he went to Kadru, who had kidnapped his mum, and Kadru said, "You're not getting back your mum until I get this pot of nectar from Indra." So Garuda agreed, and he went to see Indra. But before he arrived at Indra's place, Indra could foresee some evil omens. And Indra became fearful. He could sense there was a danger coming. So he asked his spiritual master, Brihaspati, there's some evil omens and I sense some danger. And he explained that Garuda's coming to get this pot of nectar. And Indra became fearful. So everyone in the material world, we have our pots of nectar. We are trying to hide from getting taken away because we're very attached to these pots of nectar. And there's a verse in the Bhagavatam, Yashahamanagrinami. And this explains that Krishna, if he does favour someone, he'll take things away. This is Krishna's kindness. And not only will he take it away, but he'll take it away in a very wonderful way. Because Krishna he's like a surgeon, he's like a physician. He doesn't want to hurt us. He doesn't want to just keep on taking things away from us, like the things that aren't good in our devotional service, just to hurt us. He wants to take it away because sometimes these things that we're hanging on to, these little pots of nectar, they're not good for us in our devotional service. They may be anarthas within the heart or unnecessary material attachments. So Krishna, he removes these things which are unnecessary because he wants us to have more love for him. And these can be obstacles. And I did hear a story from Vaisheshika Prabhu. He said that there were two, this is in India, and he said there were two policemen walking along. And the other policeman, one policeman said, "Oh, isn't it really interesting that we're policemen and we're, trying to catch thieves?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's very interesting, but consider this, that, we worship Krishna and he's the biggest thief." He's Muckinshaw, he steals yogurt and butter and so many other things, but we're worshipping a thief, but we're trying to catch thieves. So one of the policemen said, "That's very interesting, but our thief, all right, we put great barriers around our heart, all right, and around ourselves to protect these, things that we don't want Krishna, or we don't allow to let ourselves to let go. All right, but Krishna, he's so expert that he'll come through whatever barriers we put up, and he'll take. He'll take whatever these things are getting in our way in devotional service, and we can't stop him. Krishna is smaller than the smallest, and he's bigger than the biggest. So Indra, he became fearful, so he devised a plan. He thought, I don't want to lose this pot of nectar. So he put this pot of nectar and he surrounded it by a wheel with spikes. And he put two very deadly snakes there as well. And he surrounded this wheel of spikes with high walls of fire. And then around that, 1,000 very powerful devas or demigods with weapons. So Garuda came and he, just expanded himself very big, started flapping his wings, and it created a dust storm. So he bewildered all the devas. They couldn't see. And then he entered within near the fire, and then he assumed with his mystic power 1,000 faces, and he took water and he just blew the water onto the fire. And then, it'd make a good movie, this. And then he shrunk himself really small and entered under the wheel and smashed it and killed the two snakes. Sounds very easy. And then he took the pot of nectar and he went to Kadru and the serpents where his mum was being held. And as he approached with the pot of nectar, the serpents come running at him to get the pot of nectar. But Garuda said, "Hey, hang on. This pot of nectar, it's a divine drink, so you just have to go take bath and clean up, and then I'll give you the nectar." And then he said, "But first of all, I've got to put on kusha grass." And before this, I missed the point, Indra, when Garuda took the nectar, Indra petitioned Garuda to give back the nectar. So Garuda told him, "When I put down the nectar, wherever I put it down, you can come and grab it." So the serpents, they went and took bath, and Garuda put down the nectar, and then Kadru came. And she said, "All right, I want that nectar." And Garuda said, "You're not going to get it now until I get my mum." And so Kadru agreed, and she brought Garuda's mum, and then he flew off with his mum, and she was waiting for the serpents to come back after bath and get the nectar. But in the meantime, Indra came and took the nectar because he's attached. And he's so much attached that Garuda is called a Sakama devotee, which means he's a devotee, but is also materially attached, because he's the king of heaven, but he's a servant of Krishna as well. And I probably won't get through all my class, but so we can see, I'll jump to the bit where Duryodhana, he was explained here that Duryodhana was as strong as the king of heaven, and still the sons of Pandu, the preachers, were able to snatch away the kingdom from Duryodhana. So we can see that the Pandavas were outmatched and outgunned. The Kauravas were much more powerful, with Bhishma Dev and Karna, but the Pandavas fought with their full determination, and Krishna carried what they lacked. Right? This is verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Anandas Chintayanto Mam, Ye Jana Pasapasate. Krishna says that you just do your service with determination, and whatever you're lacking, I will carry. I will help you through. So Krishna won't give a devotee more than they can handle. That's why I'm saying Krishna's an expert physician. He'll give us what we can manage. He's not going to give us too much. And who could endure what the Pandavas went through? The Pandavas were confronted with so many obstacles, but because they're absorbed in their Krishna consciousness, they came out victorious. And victory, it doesn't mean winning or losing. Actually, victory means that we love Krishna more. That's our real victory. It's not that, we feel a sense of victory when we get things and we feel a sense of defeat when we lose things. No, we feel a sense of victory when we develop our love for Krishna. And Krishna may take or give away. In any situation, we should just love Krishna. And not only that, but Duryodhana, he had the opportunity of a few occasions to give back this kingdom, back to the Pandavas. He was petitioned by Krishna himself and also Vidura. And one last point I'll make is that there's this theme of preemptive giving. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Preemptive giving. It means that everything's going to be taken away, so why should we wait until at the time of death when it's all going to get taken away? We should preempt that we're going to lose everything and beforehand give everything to Krishna. Because if we lose everything at the time of death, we don't get any benefit. We don't get any benefit if things are forced away from us. But we get all the benefit if we preempt it and give everything to Krishna beforehand. And that's what with Duryodhana. Duryodhana had the opportunity. He had the opportunity to preempt and give the kingdom back to the Pandavas. And if he did that, he would have become glorious. But he refused to. He tried to hang on to all his material things, and Krishna forced it off him. He took everything away, including his life and all his family members. So if we give everything to Krishna, then we get the ultimate benefit. And I'll just leave room for some questions or some reflections or some comments or some corrections. Anyone would like to say anything or add anything? Steph.
Situations where we want to renounce something and then we go back on it later, and I really appreciate it.
That's pretty honest.
I was just thinking how you were saying Krishna gives us exactly as much as we can handle. Why is it so often that we hear devotees getting burned out? And how can we overcome that sort of feeling of burnout?
That's a good question. Who hasn't experienced getting burnt out? Everyone. Who hasn't? And we all have. That's why it's very important to accept guidance in our devotional life, because the more experienced devotees, they've been around for 10, 20, 30, 40 or 50 years because they've been able to manage themselves more nicely in Krishna consciousness. They see the long-term goal ahead and they know it's a long path to get from A to B. So when we take shelter of the senior devotees, and even in the Bhagavatam, not the whole, but there's a lot of examples of Krishna always referring his disciples to take shelter of more senior disciples, because they know how to pace themselves for the long run in devotional service. And as beginning devotees, we get very enthusiastic in devotional service, but we don't see that devotional service is a lifelong process of becoming detached and becoming fixed on Krishna. So I can suggest from my experience that we take shelter of the senior devotees and we get guidance on how we can perform our devotional service in a way where we can stay for the long run. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that actually if we follow an ashram but we're not doing it under guidance, it's not pleasing to him. So guidance is very important. And our whole culture in the Krishna conscious movement is a guidance ashram. So your point there, Savannah, of how do we not get burnt out in Krishna consciousness is different for everyone, because everyone performs devotional service with different enthusiasms and different motivations. But definitely if we get instruction from more senior devotees on how we can pace ourselves, and the reason is because they have paced themselves. And yeah, we can definitely get inspired by them. that okay? Yeah. I got a thumbs up from. Yeah, that's it. Anyone else? Because we've got breakfast coming.
I'll just make a comment on the burnout. Sometimes, we do get burnout in devotional service. Other times things happen which we, get into a jam, like our car blows up in the middle of nowhere or something, right? And it's a situation which is seemingly overwhelming, and the burnout is like that sometimes. It's all about how we can wend our way out of it. How can we work a way out of that situation in where we burned out and get back onto our feet. That is the expertise of our devotional service, how we can get out of the situation. And you can't get out of it without praying to Krishna. That's one thing that is 100% sure.
Yeah, definitely. And what does Krishna do? To send a devotee. Definitely to help us. Yeah, good point, Prabhu. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi.